Welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology, joined by returning guest Andrew Bartel. And we're going to be talking about what is trad recovery, something that broke the internet a few months back, and certainly worth exploring. Welcome back, Andrew. How are you?
Doing very well, Michael. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, excited about this. So I think you actually wrote an article recently. In fact, I put a link to it in the show notes, and that is kind of what is triggering this show. So tell us just a little bit about that before we start exploring some clips that you have.
Sure. Yeah, I wrote the artical. And I hope you'll forgive my work attire. I'm coming right off work here in Montana, where I work in the glass business. But anyway, so I wrote this article right when this kind of all blew up, and I actually heard about it secondhand from a lot of the people I know and are close to who are on social media, because I'm not on social media. So I didn't know there was that kind of firestorm going on. So they were reaching out to me going, Andrew, this is blowing up, and, Taylor Marshall is tweeting about it. And, we're on, it's being written about in Crisis Magazine, it just kind of blew up. And I was like, oh man, I wonder what happened. And I started going on and seeing some of the reactions, by some of these traditional Catholic commentators, and it was something else. I mean, it really was. Some of them actually had me laughing. I mean, I almost wanted to cry, and for some of them, because it just hurt, And I have some clips actually I could probably show you.
Yeah, and I want to see those.
Okay.
I didn't really catch most of them.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't. I think at first people a lot of people weren't taking it seriously. Like they thought it was a joke, and then they realized it was legit. And then at that point, some of the people were just wanting to have fun with it. But unfortunately, before they started, making forays into juvenile humor or, criticizing it, they didn't really do a whole lot of investigation into it. Matter of fact, there was a flood of people into kind of the private forum, and they were taking screenshots and sharing these screenshots all over social media out of context. And it was kind of a disaster. But most people did a very, very superficial and cursory look into what it's actually about. And you can see that from some of these clips we're going to watch.
It reminds me of what they do to me literally every single day. I remember when, so it's kind of a taste of what I go through every hour. Well, it reminds me of I was in Rome, and all of a sudden I got a message about people going wild about this, and I just didn't have the time. I got a million other things I'm doing, and so I didn't really look a whole lot into it. But for me, it was like, it's another day in the office.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is what they do.
Well, should we dive into some of them?
Let's do it. Go ahead, share your screen.
Cool. So this first one, I'm not familiar with Restoring the Faith Media. I think it's Mike Parrott, isn't it? He has a YouTube channel.
Yeah, he's the one who said that I'm Barron funded and all kinds of wild and insane.
Yeah. Okay. That's where that came from.
Even though I would be very happy to receive funding from Bishop Barron.
Yeah. Well, this one, when you look at the thumbnail for this one, it's got you on the center of it. You were
of course,
since of course you were on the poster originally. But oh man, I started watching this and I just went, oh please don't tell me they're actually doing this for real. So let's check it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess this is the rundown. A group of guys with Mike Parrott together to talk about things.
Was that their intro music?
Yes.
Approved.
Nice.
Thank you, brothers and sisters, for joining us today for our first annual Former Trad, our Trad Recovery Conference, because we all know how mean and evil and mean-spirited so many trads can be. And therefore, we just have to blame them all for everything and all of our own problems so that we come to the loving heart of Jesus by blaming others. And I'm Ryan. I am, the coordinator here at Trad Recovery. And I have asked several former trads. I've been asking them for a long time. It's taken them a while to get in touch with their feelings and to break out those felt banners and to just embrace the spirit. I just want to stop for a minute and say, oh, Almighty God and Father, I give you thanks. I just give you thanks for having brought our trad brothers out.
Is he engaging in a fake prayer
into
the name of God?
The 1970s. Thank you, oh Lord Jesus, for having brought these people here, and we're going to bring them on in a moment. But I just want to give you glory unto you, oh Lord, glory unto you, and thank you. I thank you. I thank you. I praise you. I give you all the thanks. Boom shakalaka, boom shakalaka, laka. All right, there we go. In the name of the Creator and the Redeemer and the Sanctifier, Amen. Now, the first person I have on is Alberto.
He actually did the sign of the cross when he did that too. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Nice. Beautiful mind gone to waste.
Right. Yeah. I was, oh no. And it goes on and on. I mean, you can see, they did this for quite a while. I mean, they eventually launched into other things, but like, Michael, this went on. And then all the other guys got into it and they were all doing this whole, I don't know, parody thing, but it's like,
yeah.
Come on, guys.
This is what they do this because they can't address the arguments. End of story. End of story. And you know what? This is actually good enough for a lot of people in their audience, but for people who think critically, this isn't going to work for them. They're going to actually want to see a discussion of the issues.
So the next treat we've got is. This one is from Avoiding Babylon. Let's see. Oh, looks like I'm going to need to share this one again. Okay. There we go. Yeah, so this one's from Avoiding Babylon. This is Anthony Abate, I think.
Yeah, that guy has lied about me multiple times. What a despicable guy.
So he put together a fake trad recovery commercial.
Okay.
That I think you'll get a kick out of.
Have you or a loved one been exposed to traditional Catholicism? Has hearing the Our Father in Latin harmed your soul? Have you heard a sermon by Father Isaac or Father Ripperger? Well, we at Catholics in Communion can help. We're hosting a trad recovery conference this coming July, where we will teach you to forget the St. Michael's prayer. Free yourself from the brown scapular, hanging like a millstone around your neck. A conference where you'll be certified as a Eucharistic minister and taught to play the tambourine to John Michael Talbot hymns. Call us now at 279-73-AVOID, and we'll have a deaconess contact you back as soon as possible. Spots are going fast. Call now. Tickets start at $7.99. Thank you.
So I'm just have to point it out. So these guys viciously lie about their critics instead of actually engaging them. And wonder why there's a need for a recovery. If they didn't behave the way they behave in a very cultish way, with very cultish tactics, it's very much like a cult.
I think
if they didn't do that, there wouldn't be a need for recovery.
To be honest, too, I think that based off of kind of the style that I've seen from some of the the Avoiding Babylon videos. It's kind of very, very much kind of guys getting together and having, bro time and have, kind of having a good time, almost like you would at the bar and everything. And so he kind of likes that. And I think he was trying to go about it with a fun spirit. I want to assume the best, but I think
I can assume the best with known liars.
it was just bad.
I appreciate that you can do that, but I know more information about them to be able to do that. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Yeah, I can't do that. I can't give the benefit of the doubt to people that I know who have straight up lied about me and publicly slandered me.
I don't necessarily have the experience you do with them. I always try to assume the best of people.
I give people the benefit of the doubt until they show me otherwise, that I can no longer do that. That's the case with these guys.
Yeah. It's kind of a bummer too. If you see, I don't know if you can still see the screen. Let's see. Oh, there we go. We'll switch it back over. So I don't know if you can see down here in the comments. This was kind of disappointing. Somebody actually came to my defense, along with my and Damaso's defense, my friend. And he's like, hey, these guys are actually good guys, you know? And he responded, I have a hard time believing any good guys would be involved with this farce. And I was like, oh man. So, because when I first saw it, I was like, I see what he's trying to be funny, et cetera, et cetera. But then to really assume that about other people's intentions, it's just.
So you're just not aware of some of the other things they've done, huh?
No,
and that's probably a good thing. I think you mentioned that you're kind of out of the loop on some of this.
Yeah,
that's a good thing. I kind of envy you. I wish I were out of the loop.
It's nice to be a little disconnected from some of the drama.
Yeah, I kind of envy that.
Okay. This one kind of really rubbed my fur the wrong way, because they actually use my close friend Laura's her name. Some guy left a voicemail, which is kind of part of, again, this whole spoof around the Tread Recovery thing. And he used her name, and I was like, that's kind of stooping. That's stooping a little bit low. And as they're just laughing about the whole thing, I'm like, come on, guys, let's take it up a notch a little bit. So let's see here. We'll go to the next screen. There we go. All right.
Okay, here's the next one.
Hello, this message is for Deaconess Laura Van Luther.
I don't see anything.
My name is Frank, and I'm a traditionalholic.
Are you not able to see it?
Start that over.
Start it over? Okay. Let me go back. Okay. How about now?
Okay.
You can see it now?
Yep.
Okay.
Grew up in the Nova Ordo.
Still like my latest trivia.
My parents, they were so proud.
You weren't asked, but you're coming on.
So I can win a third time. Let's go.
Well, we got Joshua Charles and Michael Hitchborn coming on. I don't know.
It's going to be old school,
some real
competition,
okay,
versus new school.
Finally, yeah. All right.
So they're going to be on your team, actually, Nick.
Let's go.
Did they say Joshua Charles is involved with them?
Hello, this message is for Deaconess Laura Van Luther.
Deaconess.
My name is Frank, and I'm a traditionalholic. I grew up in the Novus Ordo, and only going on Easter and Christmas Eve like a normal person. My parents, they were so proud when I graduated high school for claiming evolution and feminism, and that it's okay to be gay. But years later, I found out that the mass changed in the 60s and 70s, and priests were driving their motorcycles up the aisle to the altar and dressing like clowns. And after that second Vatican thingy, it just tempted me to try the TLM. I told myself just once, what could be the harm? But when I went to my first one, the Gregorian chant, it hit my veins harder than fentanyl. I cried and I laughed, and I couldn't stop myself from going again and again and again, chasing that dragon. Then I found Annoying Babylon with Tony and Bob. And when Hitchborn and Josh Charles were on, I was giddy like a schoolgirl. Then I started going to Byzantine Divine Liturgy just to help me bring me off that high. And I couldn't stop. It was terrible. And then, seeing all those men who had never been henpecked and women happy with lots of children, it just drove me to my rock bottom. And then one day I saw St. Michael, not the angel, Michael Lofton, rapping in his grandma's house. I knew I needed help. Deaconess Laura, please help me.
Okay, wait a minute. Wait a minute. First, I'm so glad I didn't listen to that ahead of time.
Oh
Like,
my
I was-
gosh, that was
Wow.
Yeah. I can't. Oh man, I can't even. But I was like, Deaconess Von Luther, come on. But just the way that, they're doing it in jest, you might say, but it has an edge to it. What they're implying is like the kind of people who are associated with, the trad recovery apostolate are, like Catholics who only go to mass at Christmas and Easter, who are in favor of homosexuality and bad liturgy and all of these different things. And it just, it was a really unfair presentation of what the people.
This is what they do.
I know, trad recovery are about, and to do it and
very
just
dishonest. Yeah,
I know it's just kind of immature too. I just found it to be really disappointing.
I appreciate humor, but what I don't appreciate is bearing false witness and being dishonest. That's what I don't like.
Yeah. All right. Well, are you ready for the real?
You got a zinger.
These are real humdingers. So we're gonna go to Kennedy Hall now.
All right.
And I think these aren't quite as funny. Unfortunately, he's actually serious.
Those guys weren't being serious.
Well, they were being serious in you might say that cynical, sarcastic way.
Whereas he's just
the guy who has a hard time giving that serious criticism. It's like they're going to do it in that kind of a style.
But he's not going to be doing that. He's just
no. Kennedy was very serious. No, Kennedy was very serious about this whole thing.
Okay, I haven't seen these, so I have no idea what you're showing. Let's see it though.
All right, and this is, I mean, he rants for about half hour for each of these. I'm just showing you a clip of it. If you have to watch the whole thing to get kind of the full, everything he goes into. But this is just kind of a taste of, his take on it.
All right.
These people with this trad recovery, they are just communists. They're Marxists. They demonstrate, they talk about traditional Catholicism as if it's some sort of cult. They themselves they demonstrate cult-like psychology. And here's what I mean by that. They're impervious to reason. They are presenting, and that's a mark of a cult-like mentality of you are impervious to rational arguments for a thing, and you appeal to your emotional connections to something, and you become vicious, and you become vicious, I guess is probably I'm looking for a better term, but really you go on the attack of those who represent the thing that you see as a threat to your irrational belief set. Because this is irrational. They believe that if you're a traditional Catholic, that you have a spiritual disease. They believe that if someone has a crazy father who tells them to pray or everyone's going to burn in hell in 2 weeks, that is somehow indicative of a common experience in traditionalism. It's not. It's just simply not. I mean, you don't have to, this is like the cult wokeism of the left. This is the cult wokeism of the Marxist, Democrat, Liberal Party of Canada people who believe that if you are a conservative, you're going to raise bad children. They believe that if you are a white man, that you must be racist. They are no different than these cult-like followers of this intersectionality, neo-Marxist propaganda. They're no different than the people who think that truth is hate speech. They might call themselves conservatives because they're Catholic, and in this realm, they can be pro-life and things like that. But they demonstrate the exact same tactics of these Marxist people. They just do. I mean, this is a demonically inspired.
Can you pause it there?
Conference. This is inspired by.
I find that interesting in light of the fact that people like this will call people's workplace and try to get them fired, but then he talks about Marxist tactics and stuff like that. That just really seems like projection to me. But you notice what's going on here, completely misrepresenting the situation and the people that he's attempting to critique. This is exactly what they do to Pope Francis too. Exactly what they do to him. 100%.
Yeah.
And so they'll do it with anybody else who defends the magisterium as well.
Yeah.
This website, Trad Recovery, this realm, they can be pro-life and things like that, but they demonstrate the exact same tactics of these Marxist people. They just do. I mean, this is a demonically inspired conference. This is inspired by Satan. This website, Trad Recovery, this is of the devil. This is not of God. That article, you may think that's a one-off. Go and look on the website. There are many more. That's why I chose that one. There are many more like that. They believe that if you want to have the faith of St. Edmund Campion and pray the way he did and think it's wrong to not, they think that you are the type of person who would say that your children need to save the world. And otherwise everyone's going to hell. They think you're nuts. They think you're out of your mind if you're a traditional Catholic. This Trad Recovery website, this conference is an abomination, and it is inspired by Satan.
So honest question, does his audience buy this, or do they realize that he's completely...
I think so. I think a lot of them do.
Oh, man.
Unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad. And of course, what he's referring to, is an article that I think was posted by Laura, which was from a gentleman who had a particularly bad experience in the the rad trad, and it was a really bad rad trad group, right? So you're going to have a spectrum, of people. You're going to have some really, really extreme crazies, like the Palmarian Church and Pope Michael, and some of these cult, like way darker groups, and then you're going to have some that are a bit more socially acceptable, or don't have as many issues, and have a lot more normal people in them, right? So there's a whole range and spectrum, and it's not like the people at Trad Recovery are denying that at all. And matter of fact, they acknowledge it completely, and they want to make it very clear that the whole purpose of the Trad Recovery apostolate is it's for all of these types. So whether you have a more extreme story, or whether you have maybe more of a moderate story where people were making fun of you because as a woman because you weren't wearing a head covering, or your skirt wasn't quite long enough, or you don't happen to like Latin, or whatever, something smaller like that. It's like those are two different. But I'd say again, the Trad Recovery is for all of these type of people, and it's not trying to say, oh, everybody is within the movement, within the traditional Catholic movement, is bad or abnormal or just like these cult type people, but rather that we're seeing patterns that can be recognized not only in the more moderate forms, but also in the extreme forms. They all follow a similar pattern. It's just one is applying it way more extreme than the other. It's like, our parish, we've had kind of similar, how would you put it, controversy or rubs between certain groups of Catholics. I would say the ones that preferred the old rite, and then the regular, everyday Catholics, because of there's that kind of comparison between the two rites. So even though they're not saying, oh, the Novus Ordo is evil, they're still saying our rite is better than the old rite is better than the new rite. It's going to make you holier. It's going, it gives you so much more. It actually has more of the fullness of the faith, whereas you have something that is actually, a bastardization of the mass, or you have something that is weak or isn't going to sanctify you as much. Matter of fact, it could even inhibit that. So you have that kind of spectrum, and that's kind of the unfortunate thing, is that Trad Recovery is for all these people, but they latched on to these very extreme experiences that certain members had and said, see, they're saying all of the whole traditional Catholic movement is like, and that's not it at all. It's not it at all.
But that, again, this is what they do to Pope Francis too. They completely misrepresent him as well. So it's a pattern of behavior that they have. It's a disposition. It's a way of interpreting things and responding to things. It's a way of thinking.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So, I had a few others, but you know what? I think I'll probably just mention those in passing because I think that's given us a good enough impression. He went on to do a second video called Trad Recovery Wounded Pharisees, where he goes on in a kind of a similar manner. Taylor Marshall, I guess the Taylor Marshall tweet's probably worth
bring that up. There it is.
So this was him kind of jumping on the bandwagon. As you can see, kind of pretending like, because this was one of the impressions was that Trad Recovery was almost like some kind of Alcoholics Anonymous for trads. And so this is kind of what they were having fun with. So he says, "My name is Taylor, and it's been 24 days since I last attended the traditional Latin Mass. This is my story. It all started when my friend said, 'Just try a low Mass. It's cool. You'll like it.' I tried a low Mass, and even after the first time, I wanted to go again. Then I started to carry a rosary in my pocket and pray the rosary daily. I even dabbled in some Latin prayers. Soon low Mass wasn't enough. I was going to misas cantatas, and then one weekend things spun out of control, and I went to a solemn high Mass. I had never experienced anything like it. That's when I knew I had a problem. My parents and CCD instructors staged an intervention, but I was already gone. My Jesuit high school teacher called me and said I had all the signs of a full-blown schismatic, but I didn't listen to him. At this point, I was praying 15 decades in Latin every day. I couldn't stop. One day I woke up and I looked into the mirror and I was on year 3 of the 12-year Brigantine prayers. I had a brown scapular hanging from my neck and a dozen sacramental medals. My mind was obsessed with becoming a trad Carmelite priest. And I knew if I kept on this path, I'd be committed to a life of sacrifice and deep prayer. I wanted out of the trad lifestyle, but I didn't know how. The next day, I saw my old Jesuit high school friend, Jimmy. He also had gone down the path of traditional Catholicism. He told me how stressed out he had become trying to become a saint. With the help of a Jesuit priest, he had abandoned the Latin Mass and was now in a sexual relationship with his best friend. He invited me to their couple's blessing. Everyone was so chill. They didn't worry about confession or attending Mass on Sundays. That's when I learned about Catholics and Communion Conference in Montana. I attended and realized I'd been part of a big schismatic cult that treated the TLM as an idol. At this conference, we worshipped Pachamama and trained to be Eucharistic ministers. We learned that Vatican II is the best council ever. Communion in the hand is what all ancient Christians did, and that the Novus Ordo Mass is the real liturgy of the early church. We committed ourselves to following Pope Francis alone as the infallible oracle of divine revelation. Everything he says about climate change, immigration, vaccines, and liturgy comes straight from God. What a relief to learn this. I've been Latin Mass free for 24 days, and I feel so chill. So that's my journey. I want everyone to attend the Catholics and Communion Conference in Montana. If you have a child or friend affected by traditionalism, you must force them to attend. They need it.
So is this his way of deflecting from the fact that he has actual significant involvement in the Pachamama hoax? I'm just throwing it out there. It's interesting he would even dare to mention the Pachamama thing after that whole thing was exposed.
Yeah.
So
there you have it. So basically what a lot of this did was it gave a certain impression of what the Trad Recovery Apostolate was about.
Yeah.
So like the name Trad Recovery, that it's an insult, it's misleading. Right. That the people behind the apostolate and conference are actually bad intentions. They're actually evil. They hate trads and they want revenge. They think tradition or traditional things are bad, like some kind of drug addiction. They're in favor of sin or liturgical abuses. Or, maybe it's even a waste of time and effort because aren't there bigger problems in the church? Dr. Janet Smith basically wrote a tongue-in-cheek article over at Crisis Magazine, where she kind of came up with like a spoof modern Catholics recovery conference. And for Catholics who felt like the church had left them behind in Vatican II. And it was basically a long laundry list of everything that the trads are constantly hammering home about, everything they dislike about the church today, and I acknowledge there are a lot of problems in the church today, but it's the same laundry list.
By the way, they're part of that problem. They're part of that problem. They cause about half of the issues in the church themselves.
Well, it's something they don't acknowledge, is that, it's like there are two sides of the same coin, at least in its more, you might say, in its more radical schismatic version. Traditionalism is the exact same problem. And again, by traditionalism, I mean the radical schismatic ideological traditionalism, that it's a problem just as it is for, you say the progressive dissenters, the ones who want to have an approval of homosexuality, or who want women priests, or who want those things, and the thing about, this radical form of traditionalism is that it's actually more dangerous to faithful Catholics than the other kind, because for faithful Catholics, they're going to look at, the dissenters who are advocating for, birth control or homosexuality or change in the dogmas or doctrines of the church. And they're going to be like, that's not appealing. I wouldn't go for that at all.
Yeah,
but
it's really conspicuous.
But if it's under the appearance of, oh, look at how reverently they say the traditional Latin Mass.
Under the appearance of piety. And not only that, it's proposed as a solution to those problems that they see with the progressives. Exactly right. And so I share those same criticisms with the progressives, but then the solution that I'm being offered, that sometimes is equally problematic, if not worse, because it's a little bit more deceptive. It's often covered in a cloak of some good things on the surface, but when you start to dig deeper, you start to see otherwise.
Yeah, it can tend to be more of a facade. Yeah. So
it's
one of the things,
whitewashed tombs, it's the Pharisees all over again. On the outside, they're doing pious things. On the inside, you start to dig below the surface and you find out that there's a lot of problematic issues there. Yeah.
One of the things, of course, people were a bit confused about or took issue with was also the trad recovery name, because it seems to them to imply that we thought, again, traditionalism was bad. It was like a disease, which if they looked a little closer, they would have realized that most of the people who are there participating and are a part of the trad recovery apostolate still attend the traditional Latin Mass, still love that form.
Now that's the problem. They're not going to look deeper, and that's the issue. So I'll say the same thing that I said with Fiducia Supplicans. It's orthodox. The way they use the term couple is orthodox, but I would have just avoided it. Not because there was anything wrong with it, but because people are not going to read the document and they're just going to look at a headline and that's it. And they're going to interpret what gay blessings for gay couples, they're going to interpret that a certain way instead of how the document is defining terms. And so it's best to just avoid that language whenever it's going to be exploited by people who don't pay attention and don't read things in context. Same thing here. Would you grant that there's some truth to that? I agree with what you're saying about trad recovery when you define terms properly. But isn't that the issue? They're never going to look into things. This is what they do with Pope Francis. They don't actually look into issues with what he says. So we already know they have that problem. Wouldn't this then be another area that we could perhaps maybe minimize some misunderstandings?
Yeah, it's true. One of the things I actually point out in the article is that it's interesting that they would use this criticism, again, getting back to definitions, because there's no official definition of traditionalism that applies or would be accepted by all the various groups in the movement at all. like every single one of them, whether, Ecclesia Dei groups, like, indult diocesan masses, or the Fraternity of St. Peter, Institute of Christ the King, or the SSPX, or the SSPX Resistance, or the split-offs from the SSPX Resistance, or the various sedevacantist groups like CMRI and SSPV, or the conclavists, like Pope Michael or the Palmarian Church. None of them would agree on the same, definition. Like, they're all united in that we want what was before. We want like traditional, but what traditional means and how you apply it, none of them can agree on, especially when it comes to their own pastoral governance or disciplines, or which liturgy is the best. That was one of the big things that led to that split in the 1980s between those American SSPX priests and Archbishop Lefebvre. It was because of the liturgical differences. The Archbishop wanted to accept the latest update to the Old Rite of Mass, the 1962 Missal by Pope John the 23rd, and they said, no, we don't want to have anything to do with this. So there, right ahead, they had this liturgical battle over that, and no arbiter, nobody who can say, it's going to be this rite of Mass, right? Unless you accepted the Archbishop's authority that this is in leadership and this is what was going to be, you were out in the cold, and that's what happens when you undermine that basic principle of authority that unites us as Catholics, and that can come into these disciplinary or pastoral or doctrinal disputes, and bring clarity and bring unity to that. But again, there's no definition. There's no accepted definition. So it's funny that they would be like, oh, you're saying it should be like this. And it's like, well, look at the definition on the website, because we clearly defined, in the description, what we meant by trad recovery, what we meant by trad, which is
but that's the issue. Fiducia clearly defines what is meant by blessings for gay couples. It clearly defines it, but they're going to take it out of context and not read it. And so that's my only critique here would be, well, if they're going to do that, is there perhaps a better term?
Sure.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, Miss Happy makes a really good point.
They did ask me about that. They did ask me, should we change it or whatever? And to be honest, I can't really think of a better name, because it's the one that allows them to reach the people they're trying to reach. Right? Because there are trads who are struggling with their relationship to the Pope, to the hierarchy, to the bishops, to the Second Vatican Council, to the new Rite of Mass, in other trad groups, such as the Fraternity of St. Peter or the Institute of Christ the King. And so if you only said it's only rad trad recovery, you're only going to get a certain kind of trad. And there are a lot of other trads that are actually struggling to have a positive relationship to the church and a positive relationship to the changes that happened following the Second Vatican Council. And there's still so much confusion that needs to be clarified on a lot of those issues. It's one of the things I appreciate about your channel and the things that you've gone into is you've gone into a lot of those issues surrounding the new Rite of Mass and the Second Vatican Council, and showed that when you actually look at it historically and doctrinally, it's not the same as it's being presented by these rad trad narratives, which can cause you to have a difficulty in being able to worship in common with your other Catholics, to be able to live a common life, And while that might not necessarily be full blown schism, like the SSPX or sedevacantist groups, it's starting to head in that direction, and we needed a term that was going to attract the people who would need this ministry, who would need this apostolate, to be able to help them restore their relationship to these things, and to be able to have more of a normal life in the Catholic Church, instead of seeing everything through a certain narrative, through a certain lens, or from a certain perspective, and that's something I really want to emphasize too. Is something I emphasize in the article. I recommend people go and check that out in the link that you put in the description, because the thing about rad trad, or their trad recovery, is that it was started as something that was supposed to be positive, very, very positive. There's a private forum for people to be able to come and share their challenges, their tough experiences. Yeah, there's going to be a certain element of working through some of those negative experiences that you had. But the majority of what they're trying to do at Trad Recovery is to help people be hopeful and joyful and optimistic about being a Catholic, even though we have problems, even though we have crises, even though we have things that we're having to work through as a church. There's still so much good that's happening in the church, so many amazing developments and amazing teachings that have taken place since the Second Vatican Council, so many amazing new devotions and saints. And they've been so much benefit to souls. But when you are restricted to a certain way of looking at Catholicism, and you are suspicious of anything that happened after the Second Vatican Council, you lose all of those amazing gifts. You lose all of these incredible opportunities for growth and renewal that really are a part of the post-conciliar period. And it's like, yes, has there been upheaval? Has there been craziness? Has there been negative and rebellious movements and individuals? Absolutely. As there has been through all of Catholic history, every council. That's Venerable Fulton Sheen pointed out in his autobiography, Treasure and Clay, that whenever there's a great outpouring of the Holy Spirit, there's also a manifestation of the evil one, of the evil spirit as well. And so it's not like rad trads and the people who are pointing to the problems that we have, it's not like they don't have a point, because these are discussions we have to have. I mean, they're discussions you've had on this channel, Michael. But the problem is when that becomes predominantly what you talk about, it becomes the majority. And so you're hammering it home constantly. And then your children are being raised in an environment where it's constant negativity toward what's happening in the Catholic Church today. And they don't realize all of the good things, all of the good fruits, all of the blessings that we have been given, because the focus is on the crisis. It's on the dissenters. It's on what's bad. They're focusing so much on what's evil that they forget to thank God for what we have that is so good.
Now, I want to point something out. Anybody who watches this show knows I always bring up the person that I'm criticizing. I bring up what they say in video or an article, whatever it is. I bring it up, I show it to you, and I directly interact with it. That way you know if I'm being dishonest in my interaction. That way you can immediately check me and say, hey, that's actually not what they said. So what you're critiquing is a straw man. Now, when you watch them and every one of their cases, you don't actually pull up what Trad Recovery is about and then really interact with it. Rather, they gave a caricature in each one of those instances.
Yeah.
Wrong if they've ever engaged it elsewhere.
Exactly.
But in every one of those instances that you showed, they didn't show you what Trad Recovery is actually about. They just gave you a straw man. And shout out to Miss Happy Catholic. She says this, I just don't appreciate how trads tend to appropriate certain great Catholic practices as somehow belonging to them, but not to the mainstream church anymore, when that's not at all the case. I appreciate that, because they were pretending as if Trad Recovery is against the rosary and Marian devotions and going the liturgy, or even against the Missal of 62 and its liturgy. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Not at all. And all of those things are great. There's no problem with them in and of themselves. There's no issue there. That's
right.
not what the problem is.
Yeah.
But again, they always have to vilify their opponent, and they can never actually interact directly in an honest way with what their opponent actually says. And the one they do that to the most is Pope Francis. And then it goes downhill from there. They do that to the rest of people that they don't agree with after that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to make it clear too. I've always been an advocate for having dialogues, for interacting with people one-on-one and working these things out, talking through, trying to understand each other. rather than just talking past each other or attacking each other. So I just want to say, especially to any of the individuals whose videos that I showed today, or tweets or articles that I referred to, I am more than welcome to have to come on your channel and have a conversation with you.
And I admire that you're willing to do that. I can tell you from personal experience, some of these people used to be friends of mine. Some of these people I have dialogued with. But ever since I began defending the magisterium, in almost every case, they began to slander, bear false witness, and cut off dialogue. So I appreciate that you're willing to do that. What you might discover, however, is they're not sincere in wanting to dialogue. So you put that out there, and I appreciate you doing that. Let's see how many of them actually take you up on it.
Yeah, we'll see.
Let's see. Let me know if they take you up on it.
I will.
I'd be interested in hearing that.
So do we want to take any questions or?
Yeah, let's do it. Y'all go ahead and put them in the chat at reasonandtheology.com and not.com. Theology. I'm so used to giving out my email in the comment section, because if somebody says something and they have some information for me, it's like, okay, well, email it to me, reasonandtheology@gmail.com. I want to take a look at this. Anyways, yeah, at Reason and Theology. Put it in the chat. Let's take a look at what you got. I do have a link to your article already in the show notes, so y'all can certainly go and check that out. Let's see what we have. Okay. Jen says trad recovery is helping people find peace that works for them rather than running themselves ragged, following the loud pharisaical voices. Yeah. What else we have? Rosary is the gospel and a set of beads. It's a gift. Let's see. Ramsey says it's funny how strong a reaction the trad recovery movement got. Rad trads couldn't fathom that their side could be harmful. Yeah.
Well, that was what was so disappointing, was that it's like, I'm a Catholic, right? I'm all in favor of coming up with groups and ministries and organizations that are there to help people who are struggling in their faith. For those who have, like, abuse victims, for example, we need to help them. Like, people who have had a negative experience with, a priest or consecrated person or another Catholic or whatever. It's like they need to be supported. They need to be taken care of. No matter, we shouldn't be thinking about, they make Team Catholic look bad. That's not what it's about. It's about taking care of the souls that need help, and that's really what trad recovery is about. Trad recovery is about, and it's one of the reasons I actually like the name too, is it's actually about recovering trads. Like if a trad comes to trad recovery, is able to restore their relationship with the church and with the Pope, and actually begin to see things positively again, and then they find that they go transition back into the traditional Catholic movement. That's a win. Like, I want to see the traditional Catholic movement reoriented back into the heart of the church, because it, just like the charismatic movement or any other movement of Catholics, it can be a good thing. It can be a force for good in the church. But currently, the trajectory that the trad recovery movement is on, it's dangerous. The people that it's choosing for its leaders and spokesperson and who are representing it in the media and online, it's dangerous. It's really dangerous. It reminds me of exactly what happened, back in the, when you read about the 1960s and 70s, when the traditionalist movement first started getting underway. We're starting to see the same kind of thing happen in reaction to Pope Francis's pontificate. And the most recent example being the excommunication of Vigano, who's basically is very similar to Lefebvre and the things that he's saying.
Yeah, that's very true. Jindo asks, may have missed it, but what was the moment that helped you and him realize that they were in a rad trad whirlpool? For me, I can remember vividly. I did a show right here on Reason and Theology, showing that the Pope is not guilty of idolatry. And also very clearly, I rejected the worship of demons on this channel. Very clearly, as any Christian would do, right? And even gave biblical verses for certain proof texts that indicate that the worship of pagan gods is the worship of demons. And so I made that very clear. I'm opposed to all that. Right after the show, one of these rad trad guys, I think he has like 130 something thousand subs right now on YouTube. One of these guys who I had on the show before and interviewed him and everything was fine, came out, attacked me and said, Michael defends demon worship. And then Ryan Grant and those other guys got involved in that situation at the time. And I recall vividly thinking, okay, so I know that I didn't defend demon worship and I explicitly reject demon worship. And to then be accused of defending demon worship, I thought, if somebody can completely say the exact opposite of what I know to be true and what I actually said and accuse me of that, I wonder if they are doing that to Pope Francis and others. And I started looking into it and I realized, yes, they were doing that. And so a lot of the information that I had bought into, relying on their information and others, I realized, wow, I've been sold a bill of goods in many of these cases. And so I had to go through and just kind of do my own research instead of relying on these guys, because I clearly saw that, okay, they bear false witness and they don't do good research. So that's what started to open up my eyes, but it was certainly a long process. What about you?
For me, it was when I stumbled across a talk that was given. I'm trying to remember what website it was on. Keep the Faith. It was keepthefaith.org. They had a whole collection of talks by different traditionalist authors and speakers and well-known people. And they had a whole bunch by Michael Davies on there. So I was listening to them and I came across one where he talks about the indefectibility of the church, which was something I had never heard. I hadn't really heard about before. And in the talk, he kind of gives an overview of what he argues in his book called I Am With You Always. And this book was written, you might say, in response to sedevacantists of his time that were attacking him over the new rite of Mass, for example, and the promulgation of the Novus Ordo Missae by Pope St. Paul VI. And he was saying, basically what he was arguing was that based off of the church's traditional teaching on her indefectibility, which means that there cannot be any defects, any serious defects in her most important teachings and disciplines, the things that she gives on a universal level to her faithful in doctrine and in worship, that those things are protected, or as well as pastoral practice like the Code of Canon Law, that those things are protected, that the church cannot give something that's harmful to your faith. And he said, based off of this teaching, the Novus Ordo Mass, the Novus Ordo Missae, is protected by the church's indefectibility. So according to its officially a promulgated edition, it is a holy Catholic Mass. And that point just blew me out of the water. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I have never heard somebody argue this. Like I've heard everything, what Archbishop Lefebvre and the SSPX have said for years and still say to this day, that it's harmful to the faith, that it's a bastardized form.
And they tell you just don't go to it at all.
Yeah, that it could even be sinful, to go to it, that'll destroy your faith. And some of the more radical priests would argue that it was like the abomination of desolation in the temple. Like these are the things that I was used to, and yet of course portrayed as like clown masses and all of that craziness. And this is the first time I was hearing, and of course he went on to say that indefectibility doesn't necessarily protect every individual celebration of the Mass or application of it, but that it's primarily the universal disciplinary laws of the church. And I said, well, if that's the case, then that means I could go to a reverent Novus Ordo Missae, and that would be good for my soul. And at the time, we were going to a chapel where you only had Mass every other week, and then in between weeks, you just got together and said the rosary with everybody.
Yeah.
And I was like, as Catholics, I should be going to the Mass. Like, I'm required as a Catholic to go to Mass. If that is an acceptable form of worship, if that is something that's going to sanctify my soul and fulfill my Sunday obligation, I am supposed to be there. And that kind of started me down a path of investigation, kind of similar to you, Michael, where I started re-examining the claims that I had taken for granted. And sure enough, the more I looked into it, the more I looked into the church's tradition and traditional teaching, the more I found out that the traditional Catholic movement, in its, you might say its schismatic form or tendency, the radical traditionalism, it's not traditional. It's not traditional at all, especially when it comes to its teaching about the church.
Yeah, it's anything but traditional. If they were traditional, it wouldn't be an issue. Alana asks, why allow them to set the rules of public discourse? We have to transcend the rhetoric and projection. Well, there's some truth to that, but also you want to avoid unnecessary confusion. So if you can minimize confusion, do what you can to do that. But at the end of the day, you can only do so much. And at the end of the day, you still have to just present the truth as it is. And yeah, some people will just still twist your words anyway at that point. It's going to happen.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And I think Alana has an important point, which is, based off of some of the clips I showed today, we don't want to stoop to that level. We don't want to, because that's not the way to attract converts. It's not the way to show the gospel, to show the charity and maturity of the Christian faith. We don't want to stoop to that level. We have to keep it, keep discourse in a way that is charitable and reasonable, and is something that actually builds up the church instead of tearing it down. So I think, Alana's got a good point.
Looking through the chat here. Let's see. I think actually there's a super chat. Let me grab that one real quick. Okay, thank you, Matthew. Perhaps it was already mentioned, but Et Si Multa by Pius IX completely refutes the Sedevacantists. Yeah, I think I did a show on it at some point. I got so many videos at this point, I don't even remember, but if I haven't, I'll need to do one.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. Once you get out of that box and you actually start reading things with new eyes, it's amazing how many things you keep stumbling on over the years. I've got a huge binder. One of these days I might turn it into something of all the different teachings or quotes or encyclicals or constitutions or things, teachings from the church and from the magisterium that completely contradicts the way that the radical traditionalists present Catholicism and their modus operandi, you might say, their Operation Survival, their way of what they would say maintaining the faith or being the loyal remnant. Like, all of that has been refuted so many times by incredibly our brilliant doctors of the church, most especially St. Francis de Sales. I always recommend everybody read the Catholic Controversy because it's just amazing how his arguments apply to these dissenting movements today, whether progressive or traditionalist.
I absolutely agree with that. So James's interview says, Radtrad movement ruined my experience of Catholicism. It led me into recognize and resist, SSPX, Sedevacantism, and atheism. I'm slowly reconstructing, but I'm cautious. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're starting to come out of that, and I can understand. I get it. I totally get it. And this is my problem with the reactions that you showed on the screen. They're dismissing that this stuff is happening. And that's the problem. There are real people who fall away from the church and leave the church because they buy into some of this stuff.
That's right.
And that's a problem. So that's what trad recovery is for, is to help those people realize that tradition is good and holy. And we need to have a tradition in the Catholic faith, but also work through some extreme groups out there, such as traditionalism, as y'all make that distinction. So, yeah. Do you want to comment on that one before I go to the next one?
No, I just say keep it up, brother. Yeah, it takes time. It definitely is a process. It's a process, but
it is.
Just be patient and trust our Lord, and he's always faithful. He's always there for you, and it only gets better. It only gets better. So,
does Andrew want to give us a tiny peek at his talks he'll give at the conference next week?
Yeah, so we've got some really exciting speakers and a great lineup of talks. I myself, I'm giving 2 of them, but I'm really looking forward to listening to the other speakers. We've got my friend Dom Dalmaso with the Logos Project. Please definitely go check his channel out. He's got some amazing videos on communal theology and Ratzinger, and he's just a real brain. He's a real brain, and I'm really looking forward to his talks. Jeremiah Bannister, the Paleocrat, he is going to be there with his whole family. I can't wait to meet him. He's such an incredible individual, and I can't wait to hear his inspiring story. And then we've got a sister who is a formerly in CMRI, Congregation of Mary Immaculate Queen sister. She's going to be giving a couple talks. She's an incredible person. So much wisdom, very deep spirituality. And trying to think if I'm missing. Father Gilbaugh of our diocese in Helena, Montana. He's going to be giving a talk. I know you know him. He's great.
Really good priest.
Really it's going to be so much. I can't wait. And it's one of the things that was a real positive of all of this publicity. And negative publicity is we got way more signups than we otherwise would have. More people finding the site, more people wanting to come.
That's what blows me away. It's foolish how their strategy really is. If they were smart, they would just ignore their critics.
Yeah.
But for some reason, they want to put a spotlight, and it's like,
hey, God, it's how
because
God works in mysterious ways.
Combined, they have a larger reach than their critics. So combined, if they're putting a spotlight on their critics, they're just bringing more attention.
Right.
So it makes no sense for them to do that. If they were smart, they would just be quiet.
Yeah. But even negative publicity is publicity. So but it'll be good. My 2 talks are going to be on St. Francis de Sales, his 8 rules of faith. Many people are familiar with kind of the 3 primary rules of faith of the sacred scripture and tradition and the magisterium. But he also gives 5 other rules of faith that are also really interesting and help give you a bit of a fuller picture and feel more confident about what you know and what you believe and where you're at as a Catholic. So I'm really excited about that one. And then I'm also going to be giving a talk on how to find and identify the church in the modern world, because we live in a time where we're just inundated with noise on social media and the internet and constant distractions and so much conflicting information back and forth. And it can really lead us to be really confused and have a lot of conflicting, superficial knowledge about a lot of different things. And it can obscure our ability to find Christ's church, our mother, our Holy Mother, the Church. And so I'm going to be sharing a lot of the marks of the church, her attributes, and a lot of the ways of being able to discover who she is with confidence that were helpful to me in my journey. And it's going to be a great time. I can't wait to meet everybody who's going to be there.
Josh asks, any guesses as on whether it's likely that further TLM restrictions are imminent? No, it appears what I initially said is probably going to happen from all the evidence I've seen. I initially said the institutes will remain untouched, and there could be further restrictions to diocesan liturgies. And it turns out Pope Francis has told the ICK, SP, keep doing what you're doing. He recently told the FSSP, same thing. So the institutes, seems I'm right on that one. And then some of the radical traditionalists were leaking alleged claims from anonymous sources that there is a document in the works that will restrict the diocesan liturgies further, but not the institutes. So if that is true, and So far, it's just rumor. If that's true, that just confirms what I initially said.
Sure. Yeah. And this is something I discovered in myself too, because when I first came back into the church, I still had so much of the traditionalist mentality, especially when it came to, we have to preserve and keep the extraordinary form, as it was called, and the old rite, because this is a more perfect form of worship. And this is what's going to, maybe eventually be restored and help us restore the liturgical mess and nonsense and everything that's, been going on in the church today. And I was still very distrustful of the church and of the Reformed sacraments and liturgies. And I realized at one point, I kind of had this discovery when I was on retreat that I was holding the church at arm's length, that so much of my relationship with the church was that of fear. I was afraid of what she was going to take away from me. And I was clinging onto it so tightly that it was actually causing my experience and living of Catholicism to be something that was very negative and caused, pain that didn't need to be there. I wasn't detached. I wasn't detached from, this form of mass. And I think that that's kind of the danger that's there is if you aren't open to the church's lived worship and practice as it is now, you're going to feel so desperate when the church decides to restrict, the old rite, that you could fall into a separatist group, into a schismatic group, and jeopardize your salvation and personal happiness because you're holding on to something so tightly that's not an end. The Mass is a means. It's not an end in and of itself. Jesus, who's at the center of the Mass and the Eucharist, he is our end. But a certain form of liturgy or rite or historical practice, those are things that come and go and that the church has authority over.
Yeah, that's a real problem. So people love the form more than the one who gave the liturgy to us. And so it reminds me of Jesus and the Pharisees. They claimed to love the word of God, and yet they were right in front of the word of God, and some of them rejected him. And so it's kind of like what's going on here in some ways. Matthew says, my diocesan TLM group flirts with Williamson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that's terrible. Yeah. So that's the issue, is that instead of proving Pope Francis wrong, that when that happens, they end up proving Pope Francis right, that there is an issue here, that a good liturgy is being weaponized. And so this is one of the reasons why there may be further restrictions on the use of this form of the missal. And so I told people when Traditionis Custodes came out, prove Pope Francis wrong. Show that you love fidelity to the Holy See more than a particular form of the liturgy. And nope, they didn't do that. Instead, they did the exact opposite. And they proved him right. So if it happens, I might think, okay, maybe it's not the right approach, but at the same time, they're bringing it on themselves when they prove Pope Francis right, when they do stuff like that. So it's sad to see that and to hear that. And
they can leadership, they can turn it around. They could totally stop making this about Pope Francis and his person and what a terrible dictator Pope he is, and how he hates the TLM and demonizing him and making everything such a battle and such a negative thing, and have an attitude that's more like many of the good priests of the Fraternity of St. Peter, Institute of Christ the King, who for them it's about preserving something that's good. It's not about bashing Pope Francis or bashing the Novus Ordo Missae or the new sacraments, the new rite of sacraments or anything like that. It's about preserving the treasury of the church. And so for them, it's something that's positive and optimistic rather than a banner to rally around and to rally a rebellion against, the person of Pope Francis.
Josh asks, how can you tell if your parish wants to join, you want to join, isn't retard or veganist? Might be a dumb question. Well, no, I don't think it is a dumb question. I think it's a fair question. So, I mean, quick, easy rule of thumb is just go to the liturgy. And if you're hearing the priest say wild stuff from the pulpit and the homilies, you already know what it is. Now, you might find some random guy, random parishioner there who says some wild stuff, but that's not necessarily reflective.
That's everywhere.
So don't go based on that. You can find people who say all kinds of wild things. And you'll find that at any parish you go to. And you won't find that just within Catholicism. You'll find that everywhere else. So go based more on the preaching and stuff like that. And that'll kind of give you a feel for what
totally. Yeah, you can really tell by what their attitude toward the Holy Father is, what their attitude toward their local bishop is. Those are two huge signs. What their attitude toward the Second Vatican Council is, and toward the the new rite of Mass, the Novus Ordo Missae. Those are all based off how they talk about that. That's going to cue you in where they stand on it. Are they positive and optimistic and constructive? And even if they have reservations, is it done in a way that is respectful and filial, or is it, you can tell the spirit in which it's offered. So
Jaser says, if I can offer some constructive criticism, your tone in some videos towards trads who are faithful Catholics has given the impression that the restrictions have been a result of them not, and then it says being outspoken enough against radicals. Well, look, Jasers, I have videos explicitly saying I am not talking about faithful Catholics in this community. So I don't know what else to do if I'm incredibly explicit and I labor that point to the point that it's just absurd. If people still read me that way, that's on them. That's not on me. I'm sorry. If I am very careful to make those distinctions, now I can't make that distinction every sentence, right? In every single video, in every single sentence. And you might have somebody who joins the stream midstream. And maybe I made that qualification 20 other times earlier in the same stream, but I didn't make it this one time and they jumped the gun. That's on them. That's not on me. So while I appreciate what you're saying, and I think that would be fair criticism if it were true, but it's not true. That's the issue. So go and watch my video that I just had on the Latin Mass a few weeks ago. And I was very clear. It's called, Is Pope Francis Banning the Latin Mass, Examining the Rumors? Go and check that one out. I'm pretty sure that's the video. I spent a considerable amount of time making these qualifications. And I just have to point this out as a teaching moment for everything. As a content creator, I make all the necessary distinctions. I make them frequently, but I can't make them every single video and every single sentence, every single minute. I can't do that, and it's unfair to expect anybody to do that. I'm sure you would agree, Jasers. So my point is, at some point, the responsibility is on the hearer to give a person the judgment of charity and to then consider them in a wider context of what they've said elsewhere. At some point, it's on them and not on the speaker. In fact, if you just open up the Bible and you just read just like one or two things that Jesus says, you can get the wrong impression about some things. But that's a problem with the reader, not with Jesus. So that's all I would say in response to that. So while I appreciate the feedback, I don't think it's applicable. But I'll certainly keep it in mind and try to be cognizant of it. Do you have any comments on that you wanted to add to that, Andrew?
Yeah, no, it wasn't really directed at me. So,
yeah. So he says, yeah, I was referencing that video with my comment. I wasn't trying to read you uncharitably. I understand. I'm just saying, think of it, however, from the perspective of a content creator. A content creator cannot qualify every single thing, every single stream, every single sentence. It's impossible. So at some point, people have to do their part. And I think that's what we're seeing here, is the need for people to do their part. I recognize that, in fact, I even said it multiple times in this stream. I don't know if y'all caught it, but I said it in this stream. I'm not criticizing everybody in this community. When we spoke earlier of the diocesan TLM and some rat trad tendencies there, I was clear maybe 7 minutes ago. I added, if you go and rewind it, I added, obviously this doesn't apply to everybody in this community. So I've made that qualification even within this stream. So I do believe that there are plenty of good people in the Latin Mass communities, and you know, whether they're in the institutes or within a diocesan parish, they're good people who just prefer that form. They don't have any kind of schismatic attitude. They just like it in the way that I like the liturgy of Chrysostom. So there's nothing wrong with that. And unfortunately, they're kind of caught in the fire here, between what's going on with Pope Francis and disciplining the ones who are the dissenters, and that is unfair to them. And I'm careful to point that out. So do consider that. All right, let's see if there's anything else in the chat. Often it's the receiver, not the sender. I'm noticing in some cases that that's the case. Yeah. In some cases.
Yeah.
Anything else in the chat? Well, I think we grabbed everything. I see a lot of comments, but I was looking specifically for questions. So, okay. Anyways, well, hey, put in a plug for anything else you want to make the audience aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody who is interested in the or thinks they would benefit from the Trad Recovery Apostolate, please go to tradrecovery.com. You'll find there are all kinds of amazing resources for changing your perspective on the life of the church, showing all of the incredible fruits and goodness that are a part of the church since the Second Vatican Council, and those reforms, and the incredible optimism that we have. It's like, yes, do we have crises? Do we have big issues? Do we have big challenges that we have to face as a church? Absolutely. But we can't let that distract us from what is good. You know, and that's kind of the issue, is the trads that I have interacted with, who start going down the rad trad path, and they start regularly reading sites like Most Holy Family Monastery or Novus Ordo Watch. And these sites are built toward trying to find every little scandalous thing in the church that you can, and read into heresy, into every statement that's being said, or every scandalous thing. It's scandal mongering. It's not good for your faith. And every single person I've seen dive into these rabbit holes, even some of the most beautiful, like cheerful, joyful people that I knew before, they start becoming more cynical. They start becoming more bitter. They start becoming more negative about their life and the life of the church. So there is a real need to be able to restore that positivity, that optimism about being a Catholic and about being Catholic today. And at Trad Recovery, they're there to help you do that. So check that out. Check out the upcoming conference. It's coming up here in about a week and a half. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a great time. There are scholarships available. So please, if you feel like you might be having some financial difficulties, and you'd like to come, please reach out to Laura Vandervoss to see if what is available. And I hope to see you at the conference.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this. Everybody check out the article also in the show notes, where this is covered in a little bit more detail by Andrew. Andrew, you're always welcome on. Always a pleasure to have you. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate your work.
Love to get you back on again. Let's do it again.
All right. God bless.
Everybody hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll see you later.